All right, Taylor Ham, gig'em247.com. Got a special recruiting podcast and have a special guest from Horns247 joining us today. Jeff Howe, my guy. Been good friends for, gosh, I don't know how long, man. Do you remember the first game we met at, Jeff?
First off, did you just run out of guest options? Or are you that far down the list? You got to pluck me to do a podcast.
You know what? I don't think you get enough credit for how knowledgeable you are. I don't
know if you remember, man. The first time we met, and I don't think you remember because you were late, running around like a chicken with your head cut off, was when Cedric Reed made his commitment to Texas at Cleveland High School. I remember you showed up. You shown up I think right after he had announced or right before. I don't remember, but I know you were running late and running around like a chicken with your head cut off. Like that was the first time I met. So that was 2010. So what, 7 years? Almost?
Yeah. And then that was a crazy day, and I was still an intern actually with Scout.com. Getting my first action on an announcement, of course, the kid ends up picking Texas, of course. But remember Rockdale, we were there right when 24/7 started. I think we had just turned the lights on the network, and we were both out there seeing Derek David.
Wow, that's a name I haven't thought about in a minute. Yeah, that was man, I tell you what, man. There's a couple of kids, and I started covering recruiting in Central Texas back around 2004. If there's two kids, and I think A&M fans might remember both these names, just Derek David being one of kids that didn't make it, that I thought were for sure in terms of talent, NFL guys. One was Derek David. The other was a kid named Reggie Madu, who was a safety at Pflugerville High in 2007, 2006. An extremely talented safety prospect who just couldn't get out of his own way. But yeah, Derek David, man, I haven't thought about that name in a minute, so thanks for bringing that one back up.
I know, what a waste of talent. I mean, just a freak. But we got a lot to cover, and I know you're on your way to recording another podcast. So some things I wanted to hit on, is Junior Day coming up. Texas has had one. A&M's had one. Spring ball starts today for Texas A&M, and then they'll have some events coming up, including Friday Night Lights. But wanted to kind of get your take on the landscape of Texas recruiting. I think just kind of looking up and down the list of mutual targets right now. It's going to end up being one of the more, I think, competitive years. Maybe going back about 3 or 4 years where we've seen, Texas and Texas A&M really go heads up for a lot of guys. I mean, Jalen Preston, now Terrace Marshall's involved, and 5-star from Parkway Bossier and Shreveport, Joshua Moore, Kalen Barnes. That's just receivers. Mustafa Muhammad, Malcolm Epps, Joseph Asai, Max Wright. Keonjay Crowburn. There's so many guys that I feel like A&M and Texas may end up going heads up for. What's your take on the early seeds both of these schools have been planning? Because when I talk about the guys that I just listed, a lot of them have A&M and Texas up there at the top.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. We don't talk as much as we used to in November, December, January, because they're really in the last couple of years. There was the 16th cycle where you had Jeffrey McCulloch and Eric Cuffey, but even those guys didn't go all the way to the end in terms of their interest in A&M. And I know A&M had some kids like Anthony Hines that Texas wanted that came off the board in November. But yeah, man, it's going to be interesting, and I think the thing, Taylor, that makes this 18 class makes it interesting is the fact that when you look at the talent in the two major metro areas, in DFW and in Houston, there's no question that the prize to be won in this cycle is Houston. And I think what makes that interesting is, A&M's always going to have a stronghold in Houston. I'm from the area. I don't get down to Houston as much as I want. I like being down there. I'm there during the summer for Astros games and whatnot. But if you're around Houston, man, Houston's an SEC town now. It's not a Big 12 town. It is an SEC town, and it's kind of overrun by LSU and Alabama fans, and I think that's kind of the gateway to the state of Texas for the SEC. So it's interesting, that dynamic, and I think that makes A&M appeal to a lot of kids, especially from the Houston area and East Texas, because you can go not very far from home and play in the premier conference in the country. At the same time, a lot of these kids, and Taylor, you know this from having done some stuff with that U of A. I'm recruiting 2018 kids. They were up for, had he been at Houston for the 2017 season, maybe getting kind of a landmark class, because their 16 class was, I think, maybe top 20, top 15 class with as much talent as there is in Houston. So I think A&M's got a foothold there because of the SEC, but I think Tom Herman's got a foothold there because of the legwork he put in. So, and those kids you mentioned, man, Keandre Culver, Joseph Asai, Max Wright, all those guys from Houston, the really talented defensive back class, the 2 tight ends. So the prize to be won in 18 is definitely Houston, man. You see it every now and then, but I can't remember off the top of my head a year where one of the major metro areas had significantly more top-end talent than the other, like this year.
What was your take on the Texas back-to-back Junior Day? I thought it was a really good move by Derek Chang and the recruiting staff over there at Texas. Obviously, I got to know them, as you mentioned, while they were at U of H. And I know how those guys operate. And it was a lot of kids that they brought onto campus. But I think as a new staff, you got to get, and you're playing from behind, you've got to get as many kids on campus as soon as possible so you can start laying that groundwork. And then they were able, I thought was really good strategically, was get a lot of guys that were basically 1A and 1B or the other way around on campus that played the same position, but they were there on Saturday and the other one was there on Sunday. Like a Mustafa Muhammad was there on Saturday, and a lot of one-on-one time with the family, and then you bring in Malcolm Epps the next day and you're able to work him like he's a number one. And there was a lot of that going on. Max Wright on Sunday, Keandre Coburn on Saturday, and I know there's more guys like that. So I thought overall it was very good strategically to kind of set it up the way it was set up there at Austin.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, man, from an organizational standpoint, I thought this was the most, and granted, Junior Day, when you got that many kids, it's going to be a cluster to a certain extent, but I thought from an organizational standpoint, just the way they organized everything, I thought it was the best Junior Day since I've been covering recruiting in the market. You look at the Junior Days towards the end of Mac Brown's time at Texas, and I think things had gotten kind of stale. There were guys, I guess I can go ahead and say it now, there Justin Manning was a guy that just flat out said the visit to Texas was boring, that the Junior Day presentation was boring. He was bored to tears being in Austin, and I don't think he was alone in thinking that. I mean, he was bored to tears being in Austin, and I don't think he was alone in that. Just the presentation had gotten stale. Charlie Strong wasn't too big on the presentation. He was more big on just kind of the one-on-one side with recruits. His Junior Days were much more selective. But you look at where Texas is now, 3 straight losing seasons, and I mean, it's been a long time, man, since Vince Young crossed the goal line against USC. These kids were in grade school when Colt McCoy was at Texas and the Longhorns were rolling in. So Tom Herman's got a lot to sell, man. He's got to sell a vision. He's got to sell where he wants this program to be. You got to, anytime you're in a place like Texas, you got to maintain the tradition and uphold that, but at the same time, you've got to excel. The kids, they only want to hear about Earl Campbell and Ricky Williams and Vince Young to a certain extent. They want to know, hey, when I get here, are we going to win? Is there a plan to win? And I think, talking to guys like Brendan Eagles was one who was really big on that, Alvante Woodard. Those guys really thought that Tom Herman sold it well. They kind of bought into the vision he's got for where he wants to take Texas football. I think from that standpoint, I think that Tom Herman hired, just understanding the importance of things like social media. I think being able to relate to all different constituency groups. I think the fact that he can relate to recruits and parents and trainers and high school coaches and boosters, in kind of approach of being able to reach out to multiple people, which you've got to do at Texas. And I just don't think Charlie Strong did that very well. I think from that standpoint, man, I think he's pushed all the right buttons so far. I think one of the best things he did was showing recruits what the new facilities are going to look like. I mean, they're upgrading the weight room finally. They're redoing the locker rooms. So there's going to be all kinds of graphics changes throughout the Moncrief complex. So I think just selling that vision and what it's going to be, I think really helps too, because Texas has fallen way behind on facilities, man. I mean, if you went to A&M right now and looked at their facilities and then looked at Texas facilities, I think you'd be floored at how far ahead A&M is in terms of facilities. I mean, I can tell you stuff from talking to some people around the Big 12. Kansas has a better locker room set up than Texas right now. Iowa State has a better weight room than Texas does right now. I don't think it's going to be the case once Texas finishes their renovations this summer, but you get the idea of how far they've fallen behind. So this is a program that needed a shot in the arm, and I think to a large extent, Tom Herman has done a good job. And Junior Day was a big part of that. I know that's kind of a really kind of overview answer to your question, but I think just really selling the vision, man. He had to sell it. I think a lot of kids were really digging what he and the staff had to sell.
Yeah, I've been kind of stressing this on the board, been a little bit controversial just because, I'm passionate about, this stuff, and we've been involved and we see it. We have a different perspective. We talk to the kids, we talk to coaches, we know what these junior days are about and what makes these kids tick. And I just think there's going to kind of start to be a bit of a trend and a different way towards approach to these junior days. I think you're going to have to see schools get a little bit more innovative and a little bit more detailed about, how their approach is. Because, for example, I interviewed Keandre Coburn after the A&M junior day, and he, asked him, hey, what were some things you really liked about the visit? Were some things that maybe, a con in a sense? And, he's like, no, there wasn't really a con, but I really wished I had heard more about football. And I think you're going to see coaches and the support staffs do a lot more research on, okay, when we have this kid on our campus, because you may only get that kid, that top target on your campus 3 or 4 times, between that moment and signing day. So you have to maximize it. So, what is important to this kid? What's going to make him tick? And, what's actually going to sell him on your program, and it's going to resonate, because there's a big difference between effective and ineffective recruiting. And you can be really good at staying on top of a kid, but is it really resonating? Is it being productive? Is it getting your point across? And I think the junior days, you're going to see a lot more different approaches kind of moving forward in terms of being able to kind of stand out. And I wanted to get your take on, if you were in control, or if you were doing some things, at Texas or any school, what were some things you feel like would really capture a recruit nowadays? Because we're really starting to get into dealing with personalities are changing. The whole social media aspect is really kind of changing the game with recruiting.
Taylor, so much has changed, man, since we started the business, especially me. Like I said, I started, so I've seen a lot of stuff change since I've been doing this. But I think when you ask recruits honestly what you're looking for, and you ask them off the record, on the record, they'll say academics and they'll say this, that, and the other. But if you really ask them, okay, what do you really want to school? I'd say 7 out of 10 of them would tell you, I want to know where I'm going to have the best shot to go to the NFL, and I want to know where I'm going to have the best shot to win a championship.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it is. The junior days are delicate balance because you've got to talk about academics. You do have to. I think, at Texas in the past, I think that was too big. Not to poo-poo academics at all. I think that was too big of a part of it, and the structure of the university in general was too big of a part of it. You got to have that in there. Because that's what the parents, and I think that's what the recruits to an extent are going to want to hear. But, you've got to be able to figure out what these kids identify with. And, if you're at Texas, it's going to be guys like, if you're a running back, you want to hear Stan Drayton tell you about, I recruited and coached Ezekiel Elliott. I coached Carlos Hyde. When I was in the NFL, I had Jordan Howard who had 1,300 yards for the Chicago Bears. They want to hear about the kind of stuff. They want to know about the running. They might want to know about the running back tradition at Texas. Like, hey, Deontay Foreman had 2,000 yards last year. Jamal Charles has been one of the best backs in the league for the last decade. Ricky Williams and Earl Campbell won Heisman here. So you've got to tap into the tradition and things kids can relate to. Come here and be the next for Texas, it would be the next Earl Thomas. Come be the next Brian Orakpo. Be that guy. Get your name up on this wall. Help us put numbers on the wall by winning championships. I think, the facilities and that stuff is really, really important, but I think you've got to sell your ability to develop kids and get them ready for that next level beyond college, and you've got to sell that your place is a place where you can go and win championships.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in relationship building, and, that kind of is going to segue into the state of offering. There's so many different types of offers out there when they're extended to a prospect, and fans cannot wrap their heads around the fact there's a big difference between committable, uncommittable, the difference between an in-state, out-of-state, how it's delivered, the timing of it. Each recruit is kind of a case-by-case basis, and obviously here on my board recently was the whole Brennan Eagles timing of the offer, and I think he's a good microcosm of right or wrong. Kids, especially in-state kids, take things personally when they're dealing with Texas and Texas A&M, and especially those two. No offense to Baylor or TCU, but an offer from A&M and Texas is essentially the creme de la creme, and that's all they want, and that really kind of validates you as a player. So they're going to take it personally if you're behind Alabama and LSU and Ohio State and so on. And if, for a guy like Brennan Eagles, who grew up a Texas A&M fan, he took it personally and left A&M out of his top 10. I wanted to get your take on, again, right or wrong, we're not here to debate whether the kid shouldn't take it personally. The fact is that's kind of the trend now, and that's the culture that we live in, and you're going to have to adapt to survive as a college program, and be able to maybe change up your approach. If you're not ready to take a kid, that's fine, but I'm a big believer in getting that offer out early. If you're not willing to take him at the time, you don't have to recruit him hard, as you kind of let him. If he calls you or hits you up, maybe don't return the phone call. And this is type of stuff that maybe is taboo to talk about on the boards, but this is real life recruiting in terms of being able to slow play a kid to where it gives you time to do more evaluation, to check into their transcripts, to check into character, but it keeps you in the game. It keeps you in the race. And, it's just like the old saying I use, you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. And the kids don't take you seriously as a program until an offer is extended. And if you're late to the party nowadays, it's really tough to recover and use that and overcome that, especially at the end when it's push come to shove, like a Calevon Chasen. At the end of the day, LSU was his first offer, and guess what? That may have really been the tip of the hand for him. Is just at the end of the day, that was the school he felt the most comfortable with. How do you feel about that?
I think it's as simple as this, Taylor. When you're in the realm of verbal offers, as a staff, man, you can pretty much roll with that however you want.
Yeah.
Some staff, do it by the book and do it the right way. The Alabama stuff came out a while back, and man, we've been hearing about Alabama doing that stuff for years. I mean, and you do meet kids that are smart enough to understand, like, well, yeah, I've got an Alabama offer, but it's really an offer to come to camp, and then if they like me after that, they'll keep recruiting me, that kind of stuff. Here's what I think, man. I think you can get yourself in a bind with some of the early offers. And look, covering Texas, man, I saw that when, there was a time where Texas had a lot of clout in this state, and they really mismanaged how they handled some of those early offers. I think as a staff, if you're evaluating the right way and you got your stuff together and you know what your board is well ahead of time, I think there should be those no-brainer, no-doubt guys that you offer. And I think whether it's right or wrong on the recruit, people can debate, but I think extending an early offer, I think a staff has to ask themselves this question: am I willing to go all the way to signing day and risk losing this guy? Is he that good? Is he that good that I could put my eggs in this basket and risk maybe not getting him at the end? That's when I think you go ahead and pull the trigger on a verbal on the early offers, on the guys that you would offer early. It's a case by case basis, man. Maybe there's some positions where maybe you can only take 2. And, you mentioned Brennan Eagles, wide receivers really deep in this class, and I don't know how many A&M's plan on taking, but let's say maybe you can only take 2, and there's 6 that you really, really like. Man, you got to make a tough call. And if the position coach stands on the table and argues in favor of another kid and he wins out, that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, and the staff is ultimately going to have to deal with the ramifications of that decision. So, but Taylor, really, I think the early offers, I think people really kind of got their eyes open to it when the Alabama stuff really came to light. That stuff we've talked about for years happening. It's not just Alabama; other schools do that. But I think now people understand that. Okay, just because you have an offer from a school, like you said, a lot of schools will use that just to say, "Hey, we really like you. Here's an offer," but it's probably going to be a kid that you want them. You're using that offer. And I think with schools like Texas, and I'm not saying Texas does this or A&M does this, but maybe with an out-of-state kid, that offer gives them enough push to, okay, maybe I'll go down there for a summer camp, or maybe I'll go down there, for an unofficial on spring break or whatever and check it out. And that's just a way, like you said, to kind of get your foot in the door. But, yeah, the offer game it's really interesting the way it works. But I think at the end of the day, man, here's that. Anytime you extend an offer, I think it's got to be, like I said, that's what the early offers are willing to go to sign. I think anytime you extend an offer, it's got to be a kid you're willing to take a commitment from.
Yeah.
And like you said, man, the board can change, things can change, and guys move up and down. And I think the staffs that handle it the right way are kind of the ones where, I guess the ones that get the best results, I should say, are the ones that never stop the evaluation process.
Yeah,
maybe you've got a defensive tackle that early on was the number 2 guy on your board. Okay, well, after the spring evaluation period, maybe now he's number 5. And like you said, some schools handle that differently. Some schools will reach out and they'll let the high school coach know, hey, we had the offer, but, we're not going to take him. Let us know if there's anything we could do. Some just don't call the kid. We've seen that happen before. So I just think the ones that get the best results are the ones that – and Damon, if you're winning enough games and your staff handles it the right way or early on a kid, because we've seen situations where I'll give you a perfect example, man. When Texas took P.J. Luck, who's turned out to be one of their best signees from that 15 class, they offered him like a week before signing day, and he'd been committed to Oregon. He grew up a Texas fan, but I think it was about 48 hours before it came down to nut cutting time, so to say, he decided, hey, I grew up a Texas fan. Why am I bitter? I'll just go to Texas. So sometimes it just boils down to getting lucky and then realize that where a kid, who he liked growing up, that they went out at the end of the day. Just kind of got to get lucky.
Yeah, and just not to harp on the Brennan Eagles thing too much for me, but, I understand why Texas A&M took so long, to offer to a certain extent. I may have just done things a little bit different because – you as an evaluator, you have to look at the upside, but he didn't perform well at their camp this past summer, and he didn't run well. However, when you pop in the junior tape, it's there, and then, you see him perform really well at the Nike camp. We both saw him work over 5-star Anthony Cook a couple of times. He won the fastest man competition. So those validated some things. There were never issues with his transcript. I know there's some guys in my market who said, A&M hadn't got his transcript. He's a really good kid and really good academically, so that was never an issue. But I understand, and I don't think fans really realize, too, that there are actually internal debates that go on with every program with these staff members. Like, I guarantee you Clarence McKinney wanted to offer Brennan a long time ago, but maybe Aaron Moorhead, hey, look, he can't doubt what he sees with his own eyes. If the kid didn't perform well, and perhaps you don't take into account the fact that he was coming off a couple of camps and he was a little worn out, that's fine. That's just kind of the luck of the draw. But as a wide receivers coach, a guy that that's if you're only taking 2 or 3 and you have already one committed in Montel Parker, you've got to be very selective, especially in a deep wide receiver class, in who you're going to offer and who you're going to take. But I'm always in the belief that you can control who you take commitments from and who you don't. So that's why I'm a big believer in get kind of the Alabama way. Just get the offer out there. And, I think it's an easy diversion nowadays. Like, hey, we really wanted to get you to our campus before you commit. And I think, I don't know, maybe you would disagree with me, but I don't see many kids instantly committing nowadays, right? So I don't think they had anything to lose. I mean, very rarely does a kid, even Joseph Asai, who said A&M is my dream offer, I've always wanted to go there because the engineering program, got the offer, didn't commit right away. He's starting to blow up a little bit. And it's very rare. So for me, I'm like, just get the offer out there early, work the relationship. If you have to feel it out to see if this is a kid that you need to stay on top of, or maybe slow play a little bit. Those are things as a staff and someone that has a good, general manager, as a good support staff, can help guide that coach through that. I just think that's kind of the new trend in recruiting is getting the offer out there to show sincere interest and show that, hey, we really want you here, or we want you to come check out our campus. But I don't think it's really difficult, and very rarely do you see it to be able to manage a kid who wants to commit right away and say, hey, we want you to come see our campus, get to know us better, we want to get to know you better, we want to show you some things, we want to meet mom and dad, and just kind of play it that way to where it really doesn't turn the kid off and he understands where you're coming from. Does that make sense, where I'm coming from with that?
That makes sense. Let me touch on two things, man, that we get on here that I want to mention before we wrap this up. I think we mentioned the camp performance by Brennan Eagles, and I wasn't at the A&M camp, so I don't know what happened. But I'll say this, man. I think coaches, to a certain extent, and in our industry, I think there's too much put on the camp performance. It's an evaluation tool, but it shouldn't be the be-all end. It should be supplemented by what the eye test reveals to you. If a kid has a great camp, then okay, maybe I'll go back and watch some film, or maybe I'll go talk to some people because maybe there's something that I'm missing, or something I didn't see the first time. Likewise, if he doesn't have a good camp performance, it works the same way. Okay, maybe I need to go talk to some people. Maybe this kid, maybe the work ethic isn't there. Maybe I need to watch some other schools he played against, watch their video to see where this kid might be slacking. So I think the camp evaluation, I think, like I said, in our industry, but even coaches now, I think there's way too much emphasis put on it, more than there should be in some cases, I think. And then about junior, man, kind of what you were just saying, to get kids on campus, get them visited. Now, get a visiting, and this is kind of what I thought about Texas Junior Day, and this is why I thought Texas Junior Day was a success. Can the kids leave Junior Day? And like you said, man, I think the trend has reversed to where kids aren't committing early anymore in bunches like they had been, because I think they want to do, whether it's the Bleacher Report video or the ESPN thing or something with us, with CBS, there's different avenues they can do to promote themselves and get their commitment out, and I think some of them are really interested in that. I know Brennan Eagles has already said he's already got his signing day deal planned with ESPN, and Lucy's talking to some people about it. But anyway, the Junior Day should be about, can you get those kids excited enough to be excited about coming back for the spring game? And then can you get them excited at the spring game enough to where they're excited about coming back for an unofficial at some point during the summer? And can they be excited about that enough to be able to come back for a game during the fall? Can they be excited about that enough to make it official? And can they be excited about that official enough to give you a commitment at the end of the day? So it's a process, man. It's not, junior days like I covered early in my time covering Texas, where when Mac Brown loads up and you've got 10, 12, 13 commitments at a junior day, that stuff just doesn't happen anymore. And like we've seen with Texas, there's plenty of evidence pointing to that probably wasn't the smartest thing to do in the first place. So I think you're now at a point, man, I don't know if you agree with me or not. It's just junior day, it's still a really big deal, but it is it is more than ever. It is one step in what has become a very, very long process.
And that, again, I think that plays into my point about just getting the offer out there early, because the kids aren't going to commit early. You can, and again, you can handle that. I'll again use Brennan Eagles, where you have a connection there, and Coach Hardiman, who's really close with the staff at A&M, to be able to use him and like, hey, we really tell Brennan we really love him. If he wants to commit, just tell him that he needs to, play out the process a little bit more. I mean, there's a lot of those types of talks that happen between coaches and assistants or head coaches at these different programs. And I know that, again, that's a taboo thing to talk about, but that happens. And there's the things that we can't really report on specifically, but if you don't think they're, Tom Herman or Kevin Sumlin or Gary Patterson can't pick up the phone and be able to manage certain kids, in terms of, hey, we really like them, but we're not ready to take them, or we may take them, but we're not sure yet. I mean, it's such a moving target, and fans really can't handle that, and they don't realize that. They don't realize, like, yeah, this kid might be a 4-star, but maybe the staff sees him as a 2 or 3-star, and depending on their evaluation of it, and the fact that some kids move up and sometimes they move down, all depending on their personal evaluation of it, and I think nowadays it's just really important to start fostering those relationships. And I don't think the kids take you seriously as a school that's interested in them until an offer is extended. So that's why I'm kind of really big on that, and being able to, just manage the players and manage the kids overall in their recruitment. I think you get where I'm coming from. I'm not really worried. I wouldn't be really worried about a guy like Demarion Overshone or Keontae Ingram committing to me early. I see kind of a bad trend with a couple of schools, even maybe A&M and Texas. Texas maybe gets a slight slide because of the fact that they're playing catch up, but A&M shouldn't be behind Alabama and LSU for an East Texas kid. They need to be on top of that. A school that I really think that does a great job in early offers and evaluations is TCU. If Texas and A&M specifically, I felt like if they operate more like a TCU, I think you're going to see a little bit better results. And with the trend of kids waiting longer and longer to make your decisions, I think it gives you a little bit more leeway there to kind of play the chess game, with it. Because I think
here's the thing, though, Taylor. Here's the thing, though. You bring up TCU. A school like TCU has to be able to get in on kids early, man, because they know if they have to establish the relationship early. Because to go back to your original point, kids in this state, man, a lot of those kids grew up wanting either a Texas offer, a Texas A&M offer, or maybe both. And I think you could, Oklahoma's enough, but I think you can throw Oklahoma in there as well, and even throw LSU in there, because a lot of Houston kids, LSU has been hot pretty much through their formative years.
And you got a lot of Catrino transplants too, so you got a lot of Louisiana.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So a school like TCU, and I think this is where I think Texas fans should feel confident in Tom Herman from when he was at U of H. You have to be really good evaluators when you're at those schools. You've got to be able to identify early and build that relationship early, because in theory, if Texas and A&M are operating at the level which I know fan bases have unrealistic expectations, but let's look at the advantages Texas and Texas A&M have, especially now. I thought this for a few years, man, especially since they're in different conferences. There's no reason why both of those programs can't thrive at the same time. If you're Texas and Texas A&M, if you're winning the right number of games, it shouldn't matter if you're late to the party or not. You should be able to get in with the elite talent in this state. And I know that might sound arrogant, but if A&M was coming off of 3 straight seasons of 11 or 12 wins instead of 8, I don't think it would have mattered if you would offer Brennan Eagles last summer or in November or 2 weeks ago, man. If A&M was hot, I think he would be all over him. I think at the end of the day, that played a big part of it too. So I think if A&M and Texas can get back to that point where it's 10, 11, 12 wins instead of 7, 8 wins, the tide turns for both those programs. History has bared that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just a big guy on efficiency, always being efficient. You look at Alabama and
Right.
LSU, and they're very efficient
Right.
about how they handle the program. And I just think that you never want to get to a point where you get cocky about where you stand in the state, because we've seen A&M and we've seen Texas go from the big dogs landing everyone to now look, here they are. And if you don't adapt to that and you keep that same mindset even when you're winning 7-8 games, it's going to eventually catch up to you. So you have to be able to see that.
What the brand of those two schools does for you, Taylor, and I think this is a key part of it too that we haven't talked about. You're not going to evaluate every guy that A&M signs this year, every guy that Texas signs this year, is not going to be a guy that they evaluated early and really, really liked early. So I think what the brand does, again, if you're operating the way you should be operating, circumstances considered, then that allows you to, maybe this kid was a late bloomer, maybe he came on the radar late, but hey, and then I'm school X, I've got a better brand than school Y. That's going to help you get your foot in the door. The coach still has to make the pitch, still has to cross well, but I think kind of what I'm talking about, that helps you more. Like a situation with P.J. Locke in Texas where you can come in, you've got to maintain some sort of relationship throughout the process, but at the end, when you need a guy, when you got a hole to fill and you've got about 72 hours to fill it, the brand that brand allows you to go in and to be able to get that kid that might have grown up a fan of your school, to be able to convince them, okay, you got this offer, make the right decision. And I think more often than not, you see kids make that decision.
Yeah.
So I think that brand helps you, because you're not gonna hit on everybody. You're not gonna evaluate every kid right off the bat. Some are going to slip through the cracks. And I think more often than not, the brand, if the brand is at the level it's supposed to be, helps you with those kids slip through the cracks.
Yeah, no, there's some good points. I think there's definitely kids out there. I mean, there's some kids that we're covering right now, that have their dream offers, Texas A&M, who don't have an offer yet, to where maybe you can circle back around if you maintain those relationships throughout, to where you can make a move late on them if you need to go back down your board depending on how your season goes. So I think we touched on a lot of good stuff there, Jeff. I appreciate the time, my man. We'll have to do this again soon.
Absolutely, man.